I mean, I think that would be really counterproductive with a contrast like that. But it's like the old string player's expression, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Bruno. Just because you paid for the whole bow, you don't have to use it. Just because you got a piano, you don't have to exploit its peculiar resources in that sense. On the other hand, when you come to the intensely emotional side of Bach, when you get to things like the Sarabande and the E minor partita, for example, which have an almost Wagnerian intensity, I think it's ridiculous to put straitjackets on the music,
Yeah, but on another line altogether, it's been very often observed in your Bach performances that you play certain movements very slowly or very quickly as the mood strikes you, it seems. And for instance, in your recording of the C-sharp major fugue of the World Temple Clavier, pom, pom,
Yes.
pom, pom,
Yes.
you took an unbelievably slow tempo.
As in...
Exactly.
Well, you see, Bruno, my convictions in the matter are so flexible that I could, in fact, easily justify doing it at exactly twice that speed. But, after all, what I'm doing is exactly what Bach himself does in many fugues, and indeed in one case in this fugue, where he treats the subject at twice the tempo in diminution or at half the tempo in augmentation. He does it here in augmentation, something like this. Only without trombones, of course.
Sure.
I think, mind you, it's important to say that this sort of thing is more easily applied, more safely applied to fugues, to structures that more or less stand by themselves than to other kinds of movements. I think it might be hazardous to one's musical health to try it with minuets or gigs, although even there, one has to make exceptions. There are incredible moments like that jig in the B minor partita, which absolutely just transcends all the limits of known jigdom. I mean, that's just a jig to surpass all jigs,
But when, when you take a large-scale work of Bach, like the D major partita that you're going to play in a moment, do you still find that it's appropriate to treat tempo choice as a sort of random element?
No, and I'm glad you brought that up because I really should have made that clear. No, when I said that you can double tempos and so on, I really did have in mind movements, as I said, like fugues that more or less, or preludes or something, or even inventions that are by themselves most of the time. But I don't think it's a good idea to do that. In partitas or suites or something, I don't think there's any more excuse for doing it there just because you can do it than there would be excuse for doing it in a Beethoven symphony or any other, big multi-movement sort of conception.
Well, in the Beethoven symphonies, one has particular images of what each represents. One thinks of, or I at least thinks of the fourth as the most charming, and the fifth as the most motivically obsessive, and perhaps the sixth as the most tranquil and mellow.
And the seventh is Beethoven's anticipation of disco music, right?
Oh, if you like. So then, do you in that way have particular associations with each of the partitas?
Yes, I do, actually. For me, the darkest, the most brooding, the most intense, the most me, is the the sixth partita, the E minor, the one that I played a little bit of a moment ago. The most obviously virtuosic, I suppose, is the G major. Most charming, I think, is the first one, the B flat major. The most interesting dichotomy that he achieves in any of the partitas, dichotomy as between drama and humor, I think comes in the second one, the C minor. And this one, the D major, this is a funny piece in a way, because despite the very heraldic opening, you know...
You're talking about the French overture.
The French overture with its trumpets blaring and its timpani beating and all of that. Despite all that obvious formality, it has a curious kind of Latin quality almost all the way throughout. There are syncopations in the Allemand, for example, that render it almost like a pavan. You know, there are figurations in the saraband that seem almost to have been designed not even for the harpsichord, but maybe for the lute or something like that. I guess in general, I think of it as the most humane, the most benevolent of the partitas. It certainly does not have the transcendent aspirations of the E minor, and is therefore not my favorite.